And this phrase, the water of humanity, refers to a quote that I read from the teacher Ruth King a while ago, when she's talking about kindness as being the water of humanity. And she says, without water we harden. Kindness is an attitude, an aspiration, and a practice. And it's also core to spiritual life and religions. So I'd just like to share a couple of, I guess, little snippets of a personal and a collective illustration of kindness that sort of puts what I want to talk about in context. So when she talks about without water we harden, I reflected on my own spiritual journey and recognized that hardness is something that I'm really quite good at and have been very good at hardening from an early age. And the striving, driving, and achieving. Sorry, I'm just changing my view. The striving, driving, and achieving my way through life feels very familiar to me. And I've recognised that there can be a lot of brittleness accompanying these attitudes. And I would say that in working deeply into these patterns over the years through my Dharma practice and body work and other therapy, that I've also experienced kindness as being the most important aspect of softening and aerating this hardness, or these areas of hardness in my life. And the other thing I'd like to mention is people might have heard in 2018, the New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, in concluding her address to the UN General Assembly in New York at the beginning of her prime ministership, she said the words, "We are operating in challenging times. If I could distill it down into one concept that we are pursuing in New Zealand, it is simple, and it is this: kindness. The simple concept of looking outwardly and beyond ourselves, of kindness and collectivism. This might just be as good a starting point as any." So these personal and collective examples of the application of kindness and the intention of kindness is kind of what I'm talking around this evening. And in these contexts, Nietzsche considered kindness and love to be the most curative of herbs and agents in human intercourse. And the Dalai Lama said, "My religion is very simple. My religion is kindness." And again, the teacher Ruth King said in relation to that, to the Dalai Lama's quote, that's a simple way of saying that kindness has everything to do with everything. And I thought this was such a powerful statement about the Dharma path and the Buddha's teachings on the middle way, and how on the path of relieving suffering, the Buddha guides us to meet everything that arises. And so without exception and with undifferentiating friendliness. And this includes, of course, all the splendor, all the frailty, all the imperfections, and all the tragedy and comedy of our human lives. But the Buddha's middle way is to meet all of this without getting caught up in the extremes of grasping onto or pushing away. And so at the very core of the Buddha's middle way is this attitude and this application of kindness. And it goes really deeply. And the Karaniya Metta Sutta, or the discourse on the application or the cultivation of kindness and loving kindness, is the Buddha's primary teaching on developing a goodwill towards ourselves, towards me, to myself, and towards others. And he explains through this sutta how we do this. There's three aspects. One is in daily life, how we apply kindness to our daily lives. The second is in the development of meditation. And then the third is in our, the human's deepest understanding of life, and our very interconnectedness and experience of freedom. And one section of the sutta likens this universal friendliness, this vast friendliness aspect of kindness, to that of a mother and child in relationship. And the sutta says, even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all beings, all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world. And the sutta says that this unconditional valuing of all life is the sublime abiding, or we might say the most beautiful or exalted way to live this human life. And Gil Fronsdal says that our self-interest dissolves in this innate friendliness of the open heart. I think it's such a beautiful way of saying, this pouring out of goodwill and warmth in all directions to all beings, including ourselves. And I find it interesting that the mother's protection of her child with her life is the metaphor that's used here, not the love of her child, but the protection of her child. And I think this offers a powerful distinction into how kindness operates in our lives and how we express it. After all, protection is about shielding and fortifying and sheltering. So there's a real sense of protection, of sheltering here. And this, I think, speaks deeply to the reality of relationship and the power of this independence of our lives with all other beings. And in that, I think when we recognize that our lives are so woven together with all other humans, with all other creatures, and that we recognize that we all suffer and age and die, that we all flourish and feel joy and love and hope and despair at times, that we naturally look out for our well-being and the well-being of every other living being, because we know there's no separation between my well-being and yours. And this can be expressed in a huge range of ways, of course, from a very tender, gentle expression to one which is very fierce and passionate. And we see this in the mother's protection of a child, that sometimes it is incredibly tender. It's like holding this helpless being in her arms. And then there's a fierce and passionate protection, which is also kindness, when she's reaching for that child as it's moving towards the fire, for example. But in all these expressions, there's a deep relaxation of the self-fabrication and our sense of self as our boundaries dissolve in relationship with others. And our sense of separation from others and the world dissolves. And we see this constantly in the examples of those who give their lives and give themselves selflessly for the well-being and the care of others. I watched an interesting documentary recently on Reverend Bill Cruz in Sydney. I'm not sure if anyone's seen it or knows of his work, but he is just this dynamo guy who's feeding homeless people in Sydney from a Christian centre. And yeah, you could see that selfless devotion of deep care for others and deep care for the world in the work that he's doing. So as we aspire to these deeper expressions of kindness in our lives, how do we nurture it, and what actually gets in the way or limits our experience of it? So as the Buddha taught, it's a bold and radical move to turn and actually face the realities of our own bodies, hearts and minds, and the suffering that we create and feel in our bodies, hearts and minds. And I think especially in the current political and mainstream cultural climate we find ourselves in today, the language of violence and division is so embedded within the media and social commentary. And I mean, I have to laugh every time someone says they're cooking or doing some exercise and they're going to smash something. It's just, you know, this language is so embedded in our culture now about, you know, killing, smashing, war. We're in war against something all the time, and I think this is really obvious right now in this time of COVID, and the language that can come from, you know, trying to navigate our way through this. We run from the fear often and want to attack this thing that's creating havoc in our lives. So in practice, we come back as we do every time we come and sit together in these weekly sits. We learn to sit quietly. First of all, this is what we do. We just come back and sit quietly once again to see what's actually going on. And this looking inwards is in itself a deep act of kindness. So again, it's this opening to what this idea of kindness looks like, that kindness doesn't have to look like anything. Literally sitting here on the cushion, and maybe we don't even feel like being here. But it's an act of kindness to be with ourselves in whatever form that takes. And this is the receiving ourselves that one of my teachers said once, and it really struck me as such a beautiful expression of kindness towards ourselves. When we sit to see what's going on, actually going on in our lives in this moment, whatever is here, we're really opening to receiving more of ourselves. And sometimes, of course, this can be really painful. And it's all we can do to sit for 5 minutes before we have to leap off the cushion and go and mow the lawn or do the dishes to get away from whatever it is that we're feeling. But the recognition gives us the ability and the tools to come back again next time and sit down and say, oh yeah, fear, yep, I recognize you, or I see you. It's this gentle acknowledgement over and over, this receiving, even if it's the smallest glimpse, is part of this radical move that the Buddha is talking about. And we might not actually feel something that we would call love or flowing warmth or deep connection when we have the intention to generate kindness. But the intention for just wishing ourselves and others this lessening of suffering is such a powerful seed, and we often underestimate or overestimate. We often underestimate the power of intention, that to sit down and just hold a hand on my heart and say, okay, this is really difficult right now. This is really hard. And I'll just sit here for 5 minutes and be with this as much as possible. It's a big step, a huge step. And so, like tending a garden with care, this same intention and attitude keeps setting the conditions for further deepening into the heart of the Buddha's teachings of gratitude and wisdom and emptiness. And sometimes it's good to remind ourselves just this recognition or just this acknowledgement is enough. That this kindness doesn't have to look like anything more. It doesn't have to feel grand or deeply felt. It just needs to be seen. And David White's beautiful poem called Enough speaks to this. Enough, these few words are enough. If not these words, this breath. If not this breath, this sitting here. This opening to life we have refused again and again until now. This opening to life we have refused again and again until now. Until now. So this refusing of life that David White speaks about is this continually living with the idea that life could be better than this, that somehow it could be different. And this is the clinging to a rigid view of how my life, or clinging to a view of how I think my life should be, that it should be delivering something that I want. Sometimes I think I can sidestep the pain, and sometimes I believe I'm in control. And all these trails or tracks of clinging keep us away from actually opening to life as it is here, right now. And refusing life disconnects us from ourselves, others, and the world. But as David White writes, the sitting here is all that's needed. We don't need to do anything else. It's just staying with what is. So it might be this heartache, or this joy, this full belly, or this disappointment, or this dear friend walking beside me, or this fear of not being heard, or this fear of loneliness. So receiving what life is offering right now, to whatever degree is possible, is a deep act of kindness. And as I was reflecting on the kindness, this practice and application of kindness, I was struck by the way that kindness is expressed in all these feminine terms in the quotes that I've spoken tonight, and the poetry. They're words of dissolving, receiving, softening, yielding. They're very much feminine qualities of letting go and letting be. And so this is a movement of the heart, of deep care, like the mother's love and protection of the child. So whether we're sitting on the cushion or we're in a wider relational context, determining a kind response, whether that's towards ourselves or receiving kindness from somebody else, or opening to something that's more difficult. Determining a kind response isn't always clear or obvious. We might need to sit and take time to resolve what the kindest response right now might be. So a response is always appropriate to the moment and to the particular experience arising. So there's no one size fits all approach to cultivating kindness and in cultivating a life of living ethically. So a good question that I fall back on often is, what is the kindest response right now? And today, the kindest action or response for me might be to stay in bed and all morning and rest my bones deeply. And next week, it actually might be working long hours to then free up some time to spend with a friend in need. So you can see in those examples that, you know, the kindness is always relational, is always in context to what's happening. And this speaks to the unconditional aspect, or the unconditional quality of kindness. An American philosopher, Eric Hoffer, said, kindness can become its own motive. We are made kind by being kind. So again, this is talking to intention, and the intention to cultivate kindness is kindness itself. And kindness arises naturally when our intention is to be kind and non-harming. And kindness, as the first of the four Brahma-viharas, or boundless qualities, arises naturally when greed, hatred, and delusion aren't present. And as I'm running out of time, I'm just going to finish, as I like to do, with another poem. So this beautiful poem by Naomi Shihab Nye called Shoulders speaks to both the unconditional nature of kindness, and also that, also because of the unconditional nature, that, you know, kindness does not rely on any specific conditions or a way of being. A man crosses the street in rain, stepping gently, looking 2 times north and south, because his son is asleep on his shoulder. No car must splash him, no car drive too near to his shadow. This man carries the world's most sensitive cargo, but he's not marked. Nowhere does his jacket say fragile, handle with care. His ear fills up with breathing. He hears the hum of a boy's dream deep inside him. We're not going to be able to live in this world if we're not willing to do what he's doing with one another. The road will only be wide the rain will never stop falling. Thank you. Thank you for listening.